Gators Breakdown episode 57 is ready to go. The orange and blue debut, the Gator spring game, is in the rearview mirror. There was some good, and of course there's some bad, and we'll break it down here on Gators Breakdown. That and more on this episode of Gators Breakdown with Dave, Joey, and Bill. I am your host, David Waters. You can find me on Twitter at GatorDave_SEC, and the co-host, Joey and Bill. You can find Joey on Twitter at JoeyV_SEC Sports, and Bill Sykes on Twitter at RealBSykes. Gentlemen, a lot to talk about with the spring game, of course, but we almost didn't get this one going because Joey had the internet cut. Almost didn't get you.
Yeah, my next door neighbor was fixing his sprinkler head earlier today, and it just so happened that my internet broadband wire ran underneath ground right next to his sprinkler head, and he thought my cable was a root of a tree. So he snapped it right in half, and I had to hurry up and get my my internet company out here tonight. Thank goodness they had an opening, and they repaired the line and actually redug a new about 3 or 4 feet away from his sprinkler head. So it worked out.
Yeah, I told him earlier, it's amazing what I can get somebody to do to his neighbor for $20. Did you see a little sign there that says the 5-star nerd sends his regards?
No, I didn't. I thought you covered your tracks.
No, it has less dramatic effect that way. But I am glad you're here, even though we don't always see eye to eye. So just saying that for the record.
You just didn't want me to come on and beat your brains in again.
We'll see, man. We'll see.
Yeah, my mouth is sore as heck right now after a dentist appointment. So you guys, I don't think you'll have to carry me, but we'll see how that goes. It's pretty sore right now. So, kids,
I've been carrying you for 8 months, David.
Oh,
ain't nothing gonna change tonight.
Oh,
yeah, and for all the listeners, let's make a note of this now. Once again, Dave is talking about recovering from being on an intoxicating substance.
This time,
no problem.
Well, this time I am coming from a wedding, from the bachelor party that was a couple weeks ago. So yes, there was a little bit of inebriation again this past weekend down in Tampa. So got to
out there. There is help.
There's a new hashtag going around called "Sober Up Gator Dave."
This time it's medicinal drugs from a dentist appointment. So not the hard stuff.
That's what they're calling it now. Medicinal.
That's what they're calling it. Yeah.
Graham Happy's cough syrup.
Yeah. All righty. Before we dive in, guys out there, you can find all the previous episodes of Gators Breakdown on SoundCloud, iTunes, and YouTube. All the future episodes as well. Just search those sites. You can get the links by following us on Twitter at Gators Breakdown and on Facebook. Just search Gators Breakdown on there. Also, please share the show if you like it. Leave a review and rate on iTunes. And coming later this week, former Gator great wide receiver Chris Doering, who was on the field analyzing the spring game for the SEC Network, will join Gators Breakdown and tell us what he thinks after he was around the program closely for a few days, getting to talk to the coaches and the players, and you're really diving into that Gators program up close. So that'd be an episode to look out for later this week. So guys, Joey, and I'll start with you. Of course, just what was your general thought Friday night as you was watching this team for the first time in this 2017 season get something going where, in a game type situation, but even Michael Wayne said himself it was going to be a little bit vanilla.
Yeah, there was no surprises. We talked about it last week. McElwain said that he didn't want to give up anything to Michigan, and that's exactly what he did or didn't do. Everything was pretty much just basic everything. The one thing that I did surprise me that I really am looking forward to is Kadarius Toney. He had a couple big plays. We know that he struggles to throw the ball, but damn, he's a heck of an athlete, and he runs faster probably than most of the guys on the team. He's a weapon, and I'm be really, really, really excited to see what Florida can do with him in goal line situations. This is definitely something that Florida has to work on, something that we've discussed in the past, and I think Kadarius Toney is a present that was dropped into as far as red zone situations, and I was really, really happy to see that. And another bright note, Vosan Joseph trying to kill people on his own team, And it was really nice to see a linebacker finally step up, that we were concerned with the linebacking core. We talked about it in the last couple of weeks, but it's nice to see some guys step up and really kind of take that role of the Jared Davis, sideline to sideline, the leader. And that's something we were looking forward to. So some pleasant surprises, but overall, it's exactly what I expected. No disappointments, no jumping out of my chair, clapping. So it's basically, it is what it is.
Bill, what about you? Is there one big takeaway that you took as a general thought from the game before we dive into some specifics with some certain players and some certain things that may have happened?
Well, I think there's some very important things we saw that are positive, especially around the quarterback position with Franks. But I know we're going to dive into that pretty heavily here in a minute. And so the one thing I would think thematically that should have stood out to people is, was McElwain sandbagging for Michigan. I mean, I know it is weighing heavily on his mind. He's not a guy that generally likes to share a whole lot about injuries or about scheme. He opens his practices for 45 seconds a day, lets him see one swamp jack and then everybody's ushered out, but this was, I could tell he's like, okay, we're going to show him a run left. We're going to show him a run right. We're going to let Frank throw one deep pass and we're going to get out of here and go home. That stood out to me. The guy, and that's a good sign to me. That's McElwain's style. Maybe it wouldn't be mine if I was a coach or yours if it was a coach, but that tells me he's got that date in Texas circled against Michigan, and he's going to do everything it takes to win because he has to. And so that's good. I want to see that. We don't, this is not something we need to make summary judgments about this team for 2017. It's not a situation where we make summary judgments about individual players or units. We're just have to wait to the fall, but we saw enough to whet the appetite there and to have some fun and to see some guys developing, and that's what's important.
Yeah,
don't downplay.
Go ahead, Joey.
Sorry.
Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Bill, don't downplay that Citrus Bowl last year. That McElwain and the coaching staff remember that game, okay? And at that point in time, when Florida got blown out, Florida knew they were playing Michigan this coming summer in the first game. That game's been set for 2 years now. So McElwain had that game circled after that blowout loss. So don't think for 1 second that revenge is not a factor in the back of his mind for this game. And it really is. And I think that not only is winning, important to McElwain, but I think revenge is just as important to him for this game too.
I would agree with that, and this is a game where they have everything to gain and everything to lose just from a momentum standpoint. They're coming off a great bowl game. But you're right. They took one directly on the chin against Michigan not too long ago. And this is their chance to come in and make a statement on national TV and really say something about where they're going and give themselves some confidence with a young team.
Yeah, Bill, I agree with what you said. I was going to extend that because I was going to bring it up later in the show. But, what was, I guess, in listening to some fans, I guess, reaction and even some radio around Jacksonville here, reaction was, it's just another Gator offense that's ho-hum. They didn't do anything to impress me on Friday night. Once McElwain said this was going to be a vanilla and was hiding stuff from Michigan, this is about, like you said, it's about what I expected then. Once he came out and said that, I knew we weren't going to see much. And to further cement that point, we didn't see Felipe Franks in the entire second half. So what that means is, in a way, it could point to Jim McElwain knows what he has there. He didn't need to see any more Felipe Franks. Yes, he could have hit a couple more throws and some throws that will come more with time. But that lets me know he probably thinks that he knows what he has in Franks. And he wanted to see some Kadarius Toney and Kyle Trask and get those guys some more reps. But, once we heard going into the spring game that Felipe Franks was repping with the ones more and more than the other quarterbacks and seeing what Franks did in the first half, McElwain knew what he had in there. He wasn't going to learn any more about Franks in the second half of this Friday night than what he already knew. So I think a lot of people were expecting a whole bunch of points just because that's what you get in a lot of spring games. But once McElwain came out and said that it was going to be vanilla and we don't want Michigan to get too much, and once he pulled Franks and didn't play him in the second half, you know what? To me, that's exactly what happened. This was just a Friday night to go have some fun, and whatever happens, happens.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And we heard, 2 weeks prior to this this game that Franks had started to separate himself from the rest of the quarterbacks, and we obviously could see why. I tweeted throughout the game, as you know, and Bill and I both tweeted actually kind of in-game analysis. And, one thing we agreed on was Kyle Trask looked very subpar. Granted, he was going against the first team and he was playing with the second team offense, but you know what? You're going to have to beat the first team offenses on every single team this coming year in the SEC. So, you're going to have to beat the first team defense of every team. So if you can't have success against your own first team that you see in practice every day, then I'm sorry, you just don't do it for me. And I think we all can agree that Kyle Trask looked scared at times. I don't want to say scared, but he looked like the moment was a little too big for him, and it was against his own team in his own home stadium. There was a few times where the offensive line kind of let a guy through, and he got scared and just tried to take off and run with it. He didn't stare down the pocket. He didn't step up in the pocket and stare down the gun barrel, and make throws. And that kind of alarmed me a little bit. And I tweeted this out after the game that I believe that Luke Del Rio should be the backup next year, David. And I really do. I think based on what we've seen from Kyle Trask and Kadarius Toney, obviously Kadarius Toney is going to see a lot of the field this year in other capacities. You might see him as a change of pace wildcat quarterback. But as far as straight quarterback, Franks and Trask, I think Trask has to be in third place right now. And I think when Del Rio comes back healthy for a fall camp, I think you have to have Franks repping ones and Del Rio repping twos.
I think I'd probably like to see that as well, especially I saw enough from Franks as well. I'm not a coach. We're not coaches here. We're going to see what we see, and the coaches are going to see what they see. But, from what I saw, going back and look at Felipe Franks, and especially we were all really paying attention to that first drive. How would he come out, and how would the Gators offense come out? And, besides the first run on the very first play, that didn't really do much. And then then after that, they let Franks throw, and he hit 3 straight passes and converted a third down. I thought was important across the middle of the field where he hit Brandon Powell. And with young quarterbacks, hitting passes across the middle of the field is big to me, and especially the kind that he hit. I believe it was a 3rd and 4 to Brandon Powell. We had heard about Franks' trouble being able to hit some short, intermediate throws. Well, that was a short pass for a first down on 3rd and 4 that he hit, that he was accurate on, gave Brandon Powell a chance to make the catch and converted the first down. And then right after that, the big pass, the 46-yarder down to Hammond. I would have liked to see him in the very next play. He rifled the ball to Hammond when Hammond was wide open. All the pass needed was a little bit of touch. It was a great play call. It was there. But as I mentioned earlier, those are the type of throws that Felipe Franks is going to have to learn to make. He has the big arm. He wants to use the big arm. But these also are going to come with more reps. That's what he needs. He needs the first team reps with these receivers. We saw the play was there. We saw he made the right decision. He just rifled it in there and wasn't able to hold that big arm back. So, Bill, extending on that first drive and going, what was your thoughts of Franks as the night total?
When I first watched the game, I was a little mixed, almost down on Franks when I first watched it. And the reason why is it really looked like he was staring down his first option almost every time. And that's not good. We need the guy to be able to be cerebral in Jim McElwain's offense, to go through his progressions, to look beyond that first option, find an open guy. Because McElwain's
in the red zone, Bill, where he missed, I think it was Powell in the end zone. It hit his back shoulder instead of leading him. I think Powell was his second and third read, Bill, and he
I was wrong. Right. Yeah. That's what I was going to say. I was wrong. I watched it again over the course of the last 2 days, and about half the time he was going through his progressions. He really was. You don't see his head going to swing back and forth, but if you really carefully watch, the guy is subtly scanning the field. I think he actually did a really good job. The guy was nifty in the pocket. You didn't see him scrambling around, but you saw little subtle adjustments to pressure. You saw a couple of touch passes. He did get a little loosey-goosey on a few and missed a few. Yes, that can be costly if he's not careful with that, particularly in the red zone. But for the most part, the guy did hit passes all over the field. He showed just a nice touch on the ball. To me, this is the best chance Florida's had since Greer anyway. And maybe a little bit similar to Greer. I don't think he has the quick release that Greer has. But this is a guy, to me, that has a big-time arm talent, and we saw enough going into the offseason to believe there's a chance he can be good. However, let me just say this. I don't have anything negative, overtly negative to say about his performance, but this was not a performance that was against an SEC defense. I'm not saying Florida's defense is bad, but there was a healthy dose of walk-ons, vanilla coverages. This was not live fire. He knew that the worst that was going to happen is Antonius Clayton was going to run by and pat him on the head, which it would have been a crushing hit. But there's a big difference in standing in a pocket where you know the bull is not charging and being able to sit back and play 7-on-7. There's a difference from that and lining up against Georgia or FSU, in front of a roaring crowd, and those guys are coming. So he's going to have to prove that. We haven't seen that yet, but this was the next step in that progression. Passing grade is what I would say. Very optimistic, but passing grade for now.
Well, Chris Doring actually, I think, mentioned that in the post-game question with Jim McElwain. He said something about him missing some receivers high, and McElwain actually alluded to his elongated throwing motion, and he said he'll get that cleaned up this offseason and be ready by fall camp. So obviously McElwain knows that, that's something that needs to be addressed. And, like you said, Greer had the quicker release and such, but, I think Franks' deep ball is better than anybody Florida's had in a long time. And that's always a good sign to see. I mean, if you just watch how he threw that ball down the side of the field to Hammond, I mean, that dropped right down the chimney. That ball was away from the defensive back. It was on his outside shoulder, so only the receiver could get it, and it was placed perfectly. And it wasn't weighted to be thrown either. I mean, he lofted it perfectly to where he threw it early enough to avoid the rush, but he put enough air under it to allow his receiver to go make the play. And I think that's a very underrated talent that quarterbacks can have, is deep ball accuracy, because statistically, Bill, you know this, that deep balls for quarterbacks are just your completion percentage is low. It just is. And I think Franks could be a high completion percentage deep ball passer, specifically because how big his arm is. And I think he doesn't need the time that a lot of quarterbacks do to drop back and do a 7-step drop and kind of load up. I think his arm is strong enough to where he could do a 3 and a 5-step drop in flick of the wrist, and he puts air under it, and that ball's going 40, 50 yards, which is going to be huge for Florida this year. And that's one thing that I looked for, and I'm really glad that the one deep ball he did throw was just a gorgeous pass.
Yeah, there's real potential here for the quarterback situation to make a step forward. I hesitate to make grandiose statements about this is going to solve the quarterback problem. Well, that takes you're talking about a hefty dose of success for that to happen. And this kid is still young. This is a freshman quarterback. And so he's going to take his lumps. I think the offense around him may still take their lumps. But I think we actually may see this step forward this year that we hope for. There's a chance. There are some other factors going on in offense around him that I think could hold it. But you have to like some of what you saw the other day. You have to like it.
Yeah, before we leave quarterback talk, I want to pose a question to you guys. So we look at another stat right quick. In the red zone, 3 red zone trips under Franks, 2 touchdowns out of the 3 trips. 1 touchdown pass to Antonio Callaway, which was a thing of beauty where he showed some touch, looked off the defender, found Antonio Callaway. So about 115th in the nation last year, only scoring on about 50% of red zone trips last year. That's what Florida's going to work on. We mentioned that. It's where they got to get better. But I think what surprised me a little bit, and if the season was to start now, McElwain coming out and really, hyping up Franks, really defending Franks, really, if it started right now, Franks is the starter. Go back 2 years ago. The last time we had a competition like this in any sort of way, it was Will Greer, it was Treon Harris. McElwain refused to come out and say if one guy was leading the race or not after spring and pretty much going into the first game of the season. And it wasn't until probably the second game of the season against East Carolina where we kind of could see Will Greer taking command. He got to start the next game and never looked back. Does it surprise you guys in any way to hear Jim McElwain come out and defend Frank so much when there's the competition going on between he and Trask? Is that surprising in any way that he has come out and basically put Franks on a pedestal right now?
Well, I think, David, that it's just more further proof that what Bill had said about them knowing everything they had in Franks already, and that's why he didn't play in the second half. There was nothing to prove, and that's because I think the coaching staff, aside from our argument about getting Malik Zaire, I'm 99.9% sure that Franks is their guy, and they already know it. And I think that's what it is. You have to give your starting quarterback confidence. I mean, we saw Treon Harris and how poorly he played at the end of 2015 season, but yet week after week, McElwain praised him. Do you get what I'm saying? And that was a confidence thing. McElwain knows quarterbacks. He knows that you have to treat quarterbacks' egos delicately, and you have to protect their, so to say. And I think that he's building Franks up right now because he knows Franks is going to be his guy going against Michigan, barring, a Zaire signing or whatever. So I'm pretty sure that's exactly what's going on.
Yeah, I think this is pretty simple. I think all what we talked about and what a lot of fans have talked about with Kyle Trask and the performance of these quarterbacks, I think all of that tells us nothing in regard to who is leading the quarterback battle. Because again, it's a simulation. It's so controlled. I think they're trying to get specific looks for certain players and get them reps. They're testing and monitoring. I just think it's a show. And it has purpose to build and for them to study and to understand what they've got. I think this is part of that process. But I don't count any of that. What I look at, what tells me where this quarterback battle is who got the reps, the meaningful reps. And that was not Trask. Trask started off, against backups. He got very few reps against ones, and even then it wasn't all ones. That to me tells me that whatever's going on there, they feel like Franks is ahead of Trask. But that only speaks to their relative position to one another, or the position relative to one another. It doesn't tell us how confident they really are in Franks, but they don't know if they're going to get Zaire. They don't know, Del Rio, even if they like him, what his injury situation is, or I'm sure they know better than we do. Maybe it's serious, So if he's your guy ahead, you got to start cultivating, like you're talking about, to build that confidence. I'm not convinced that Franks is as good as he appeared to be. And I don't say that he's not. I'm just saying we don't know. I mean, take, for example, the Callaway corner route touchdown. That was like tailor-made to allow that play to score. It was so coverage. Yeah, but think about it. You got, like 8 or 9 guys in the box against a bunched up shotgun. They're in a cover 2. It looked like that guy was in a shallow zone, maybe in quarters, but I think the had a walk-on corner,
yeah,
a walk-on safety, and they're in a cover 2, knowing they don't have a lot of speed. The one guy stays shallow, and you run a corner route to your best player. How convenient. It just looked like a manufactured touchdown to me. That said, Franks made a wonderful read, a wonderful throw, and Callaway made a wonderful catch. And we take for granted all these moments, and a lot of fans, when they're fretting about their own liabilities of their team, they say, oh, what are we going to do about this? Well, the other team has to exploit it. And the same is true for the other way around. Other teams might have a weakness, but if you can't exploit it and go out and execute with talent, it's all for naught. And in that situation, so don't think I'm criticizing or trying to diminish their accomplishment in that play and what they showed, because they made the play. I'm just saying I think there was some confidence building in certain scenarios in that game, and we're going to have to wait and see how this plays out in the fall.
Well, exactly, Bill.
Go ahead, Joey.
Oh, I mean, that's what I was telling you guys last week when I was reporting that, the coaches weren't exactly sold on any of the quarterbacks Florida.
And I think you could still be right, and that's what I'm saying.
I believe that. Nothing's changed my mind but by Friday. But obviously we know that Franks is clearly the best quarterback that Florida has right now on their roster, but that doesn't mean that he's the answer. He still has months to get better. It's nice to see that he put on some weight. He's probably put on a good 20 or 30 pounds since he came to Florida, a year ago, which is nice. We know the Florida nutrition department does a great job. Look at Antonius Clayton. Good Lord.
Look at Will Greer.
If you saw him, but Will Greer, the stuff that Will Greer took was not an illegal substance. It was illegal for the NCAA. You know what I mean?
Right.
Yes. So let's not say that he was taking steroids, illegal steroids, because he wasn't. He was taking a substance that you can buy over the counter at GNC and Vitamin World or any of those, nutrition places, vitamin shop, whatever. But of course, the NCAA has about 1,000,005 things that they ban that everybody else can use. So, it is what it is. So, but nutrition department put weight on Franks. I like that. I appreciate that. I think he can last a season at the size he is now. Last year, obviously, he could not. It's good to see a quarterback that's 6'6" instead of 5'10", or 5'11", or Luke Del Rio 6 foot, I think, on a good day. So it's good to see a quarterback that's able to see over the line, and not get passes batted down. So I think he's the leader in the clubhouse, Bill, but yet, like I said, and you agreed, that coaches are sold on anybody.
Yeah, we're going to find out. But the bottom line, and I think this is what you got to look at as a fan. Hey, get excited. We saw good things, and it's better than the alternative. Going out and having a performance, even if it's simulated, even if it's meaningless, even if there's still a lot left to prove, having a performance like he had is a hell of a lot better than coming out and if he had gone 3 for 13 with 3 interceptions. That's a whole different discussion. And we said that on our spring primer. That can't happen. We told you to expect that he was going to do well in the game, pass the test, check the box. But the bottom line is you've got a highly touted freshman quarterback, and for a highly touted freshman quarterback at this point in his career, he is right on schedule, and that's what we have to hope for.
Yeah, I think we tweeted out Friday before the game started. I said I was going to take more from Franks if he did bad than if he did good, and that was not to discount if he did play good, but we just wanted to see some obvious steps from last year, and I think that's exactly what we saw. And then, guys, another thing I caught on the broadcast, and it's come out a good bit since then too. I mean, it's Kevin Carter and Chris Doing both. I mean, they were still really high on Luke Del Rio, and Kevin Carter called him the smartest quarterback in the room. When you go and look at the quarterbacks on the roster, and now even Daniel Werfel has come out and said today that he looks, that he would not forget about Luke Del Rio, that the injuries played a part in how Luke Del Rio looked last year. I mean, maybe he's more of a player than we think. We've talked about this before. Does he still have a chance to come in and prove his worth? It will be interesting that first fall camp practice. First, I would assume media gets to go for the open portions, but to see which quarterback, Franks or Del Rio, is taking first-team snaps when they do their little fastball period, I guess you call it.
Look, that just goes to further prove that, again, that the coaches aren't really sold on any of these guys. And I'm sure the Kevin Carter, who's in the program and who's actually closer to the program now that Steve Spurrier's back, and all those guys are closer to the program now that Spurrier's back, they're probably hearing the same things I am, that the coaches just aren't sold on any of these guys. But, I guess you could say, if you want to use the analogy, that Felipe Franks is the coolest kid in the math club. I mean, if you want to, say that,
I think not being sold on them, it could also mean maybe they just haven't committed to him and written Del Rio off. I mean, maybe we've got a good problem. Maybe Del Rio is better than all fans think he is.
Dave and I talked about this for the whole season before you joined the show, Bill, that Del Rio was never the same after that knee injury. He looked like a completely different quarterback after that knee injury. I don't know if his confidence was shot or the knee never fully healed properly, but he just was not the same guy. He didn't look like he was making the same plays. He wasn't making the same decisions. And he was supposed to be safe with the football, Bill, and he was anything but safe with the football after that knee injury. And I just don't know what happened. But, if we get the Del Rio come back for fall that we had in the beginning of the season last year, then, hey, I'm all up for him, challenging for the starting. If the Del Rio that we saw from week 5 and beyond, week 6 and beyond is back again, no, I'll pass. I just don't want him.
We can't have the Del Rio from the Georgia and Arkansas game. That's just, this team's going nowhere.
We'll never get Dave sobered up if that happens.
I'll never do another show again. If Del Rio starts,
you heard it, folks. He's out of here.
If Del Rio starts, I will make this proclamation right now. If Del Rio starts against Michigan and he looks atrocious and McElwain leaves him in the entire game and Florida loses because of Del Rio's play, I will never do another Gators breakdown podcast ever again, specifically because I will throw in the towel and I will never forgive McElwain ever again, and I'm out. I'll be out. Because if you swing and miss on this decision this year in your third year, you have no business being the coach at the University of Florida. I'm sorry. This is McElwain's. This is his job. This year is his job. It is. It's his job.
I don't think you should have to fall on the sword for that, man. I'll have nobody.
I agree.
I'll be out.
I agree.
I'll be out. I'll be out. No, because I won't be able to do it. I'll get on this podcast every week and throw up all over my computer. So
that will drive the ratings up. Now, listen, man.
And then I'll have to deal with Karen from Key Largo every day on Twitter, and I just can't do it. I just can't do it. So I'm not just going to make a proclamation about Gators Breakdown. I'm deleting my Twitter account. I'm deleting my Facebook, my Instagram. I'm literally going to disconnect myself from cyberspace. Okay.
Game over, man.
somehow Karen and I have. I mean, at first it was a thing where it didn't hit it off, but she's a big Bill King fan. I'm on Bill King show every week, and I think respect has just kind of happened there. She doesn't give me hell like she gives you hell. I will say that.
Her own fan base doesn't like her, David. Her own fan base does not like her.
There are a few out there that it's funny. It is weird. It's a weird little world out there with Karen and FSU talk and Gator talk, but she dishes it and she takes a lot of it too. So,
guys, just to kind of wrap up that conversation before my absent-mindedness forgets, I think the best thing for fans to take from this quarterback situation is that quarterback battle of 2017 phase 1 is over. And at this point, it kind of feels like Trask is probably out of the mix. I don't think Tony really has a chance to work himself into the mix unless injuries or something goes sideways. And that's, again, not necessarily a knock on him. I just think he's going to end up in a different position. But phase 2 is coming up because Del Rio is probably going to come in healthy for fall camp. There is a possibility of Zaire showing up. And so what we once thought was the Trask and Franks, battle royale. And maybe that's over. Maybe now it's the Franks and Del Rio and Zaire battle royale. So it's coming up. It's just not over. And it's kind of like we talked about at the beginning of spring, how the secondary situation would be the same way. You had 6 or 7 guys that were going to go at it in the spring, and then come fall with this huge crop of freshman DBs that some of whom are highly regarded, they're going to have a whole second wave of fall camp to compete. And so you got that at several positions going on. This is going to be a team that is going to be young in some ways and at some positions, and it's going to continue to evolve over the course of the season.
I agree.
I don't think Zaire's coming, Bill and David. I don't. It's not that Florida doesn't want him. I think he's not coming because of that transfer rule. I don't think that. Yeah, I don't think that transfer rule is going to get changed. I heard that Commissioner Sankey has kind of dug his heels in the ground on that rule. And the SEC is actually the only conference that has that rule about the academics, that your grad transfers have to graduate and fulfill their credits before you can be allowed to bring in another grad transfer. And I think the SEC wants to be kind of an academic elite on that level. And Commissioner Sankey's kind of dug his heels in from what I'm hearing. And I don't expect that rule to change. And I think Florida's going to be out of the sweepstakes come May for that, Bill.
So what you're saying is he called Nick Saban and said, "Hey, Nick, do you think we should let them have this quarterback?" And it's like, he gave him the thumbs down.
But wait until Alabama wants one of these guys now, then it will drop.
It'll be rules.
But I do think if you're looking at Franks, Del Rio, and or Zaire, with those 3 quarterbacks on your roster, and whoever ends up starting, you would have to think you get something better out of one of those 3 than what you've had the last few years. So.
Absolutely.
You would have to hope.
I mean, I don't want to waste the playmakers. I don't want to waste these playmakers, right. David. There's playmakers everywhere on the offensive side of the football, and it scares me to death that this is going to be another wasted year of talent on this team.
Yeah. Speaking of those playmakers, the guy that I kind of singled out last week is anything but a playmaker right now. Mark Thompson. I came into this spring game and, because I pointed him out last week, this was his chance to do something. I didn't think Scarlett would get a lot of playing time. He had his tough runs early and a touchdown. But Thompson, I thought, would be able to come in and get a lot of carries to show what he could do, good or bad. And what in the world? I mean, this guy, we know the problem. And it's the fumbling issue, and he did it again without even getting touched. And it's hard to defend a guy when everyone knows everyone knows the problem, and it's fumbling. That's his main issue, and it's still there, and it's there in the worst way. It's not forced fumbles. It's like a lack of concentration, so it's hard to move on. And because I think this guy, I think he's a good talent. I think he can do some things on the field, but there's no way these coaches are going to trust him when he's putting the ball on the carpet the way he is.
There's red flags all over the place, David, with this guy. I mean, the suspension last year, the fumbles in the beginning of the season, to him being benched and being the fourth string running back, to this, like I said, the suspension. Then he gets a couple plays, breaks a couple nice runs, fumbles again. And then now, you're in year 2 in this playbook. You've been in college for almost 4 years because he had JUCO for 2 years, and you're still doing the same things. There comes a point where, you just don't know if a guy's going to get it. And I just don't think Mark Thompson's going to get it. And I think this backfield is too crowded and too much talent for him to be wasting everyone's time. I don't mean to be harsh, but he's wasting my time. He's wasting your time. He's wasting everybody on this team's time by playing, because he can't hold on to the football, and he's not living up to the expectations that the coaching staff has for him and everyone else did.
Yeah, but who's the third running back if not him? I mean, you rolling with a freshman?
I mean, yeah. I mean, why not?
If they hang on to the ball.
Yeah, absolutely. I wouldn't mind letting Malik Davis start. Why not? Or third running back. I mean, why not? You're getting in, Florida's going to go after an elite running back in this class next year. So you're going to have a stud coming in again anyway. Plus you got, LaMichael Pirines going to be the guy after next season. So, I mean, why not? Why not give somebody some time? So if Mark Thompson doesn't want to hold on to the football, Bill, I'd rather see one of these other guys come in and step into that third role. Absolutely.
Well, I hate to say it, but I agree with you. I mean, look, the guy.
You play devil's advocate here. No devil's
I just threw up in my mouth. But
no devil's advocate here.
Listen, the guy actually, if you take away,
I just speak so much truth, Bill. I just speak so much truth that you just have no choice.
Every squirrel gets a nut every once in a while, man. But hey, listen, he had a great game minus the ball control issues, but you just can't do that.
Right. That was my point. I see it. We see it, but are the coaches going to trust it?
Yeah, 110 yards and 2 fumbles is not a good game. And I know the second one was not technically a fumble and the ground caused it, but the guy is not protecting the football. If you want to treat it like a loaf of bread, you're not going to be the feature back at the University of Florida. And like you said, sure, it would be really great to have what he was advertised as, and that's the big, bruising, speedy back that can hurdle people at 235 pounds, whatever he weighs. That's all for naught with these issues. And again, we don't want to take too much from a spring game. I'm going to try to calm myself down about that. But, man, the first time the lights go on in 2017, and here we are again. It's kind of like you said, Dave, with the quarterback situation. You can't get too excited if they light it up because of the situation. But if they come out and stink when they've got every advantage in a friendly situation, that's a problem. And I think that's what we saw from him is the same old. And you do have to wonder if not Bentavious, he didn't come here. If Lemons or Malik Davis can come in and maybe steal some carries right away. It could happen.
Right, yeah. Coaches aren't going to trust that. Brandon Powell, I think, had a nice showing. He's, the way he ended last season was kind of what we saw in this spring game. It was the guy who can get this 4 or 5 yard route and convert the third down. I think he's going to be that type of player again. But who knows with Dre Massey coming in, he's going to probably maybe be the main slot guy. And the thing about him as well is even though there weren't live kick and punt returns, Massey was the guy back there. So I think with the size and the speed that we heard from him, if they got him back there returning kicks and punts and everything that we've also heard about him being the slot guy and what we've seen from Powell already, who's not the biggest playmaker anymore. He's kind of fell off that. He had that great Tennessee game. He helped lead that comeback against Tennessee. I mean, he's kind of just been that consistent guy and converting the third downs for first downs. And in a way, he honestly looked like Felipe Frank's favorite receiver Friday night.
Yeah, I was just about to say, David, that you literally took the words out of my mouth. Franks and Powell seem like they got a nice rapport going. And if Franks is the guy this season, which we at this point in time expect him to be, I wouldn't be surprised if Powell has a great senior season this year and has a breakout year. He could have his best numbers yet, provided he stays healthy. I mean, we saw what Powell did with a guy like Will Greer, who could actually get him the ball, on time. Powell and Greer had a good connection for the first 6 games of the season. And if Franks comes in and gets him the ball the way Greer did, then Powell's going to have a great year this year. And I would absolutely love to see a guy like Brandon Powell, who's pretty much put his time in, and has had his ups and downs, have a great year this year. But I want to say this. Antonio Callaway looks like a stud, okay? We knew he's a stud, but from all I'm hearing that's coming out of spring camp this year, Bill and David, is that he's been lights out. He has had a fire under his rear end, and I think he knows that he's going to get drafted in the first round, and I think he wants to be a top 10, top 15 pick this year. And I think the only way he's going to do that is if he has a year like his freshman year or a little bit better, obviously. But if Franks could get him the ball this year, guys, I think Antonio Callaway could be a top 2 or 3 receiver in the entire country this year.
You want to extend anything from the receiver position, Bill?
Yeah, I tell you, this is an interesting position, particularly in the slot. You talk about Brandon Powell, but this fall, when Massey gets the green light and Tony starts maybe getting a summer to learn the playbook and maybe start picking up some of these slot reps. You talk about a furious and tenacious battle at a position. It's the slot receiver. I mean, outside, you got to think that Cleveland and Callaway, and they pretty much got the top 2 spots locked down, although Shirley Hammond has to be in consideration for, a solid number 3 right now. And, Swain's going to be back. That's a solid floor from on the outside. But between what we've heard, the growing budding legend of what is going to happen with Massey when everybody anticipates, then you got kind of the blue collar Powell, who is very consistent. He's upperclassman savvy. He's got the experience, and now maybe he does have the quarterback, like Joey said. And then Tony, who, man, a guy that can move, and he kind of runs a little bit like Rainey, not as fast, and he's bigger, but kind of stomps his foot in the ground and cuts. You might have a chance to really make those motions at the pre-snap mean something to defenses now. You might really start to see some of these reverses and wrinkle plays. And, if you come across the middle on a drag and they get that 3-yard completion, well, it might go to the house. So I'm really looking forward to see what happens at that position this year and how that develops in that battle.
Can I get the Urban Meyer shovel pass back? Can we get it back?
Yeah. I tell you what, man, Kadarius Toney for the next 3 years here is going to cause defensive coordinators to stay up at night.
I'm glad you brought that up.
Telling you, I was saying it. You got people saying that he should be the starting quarterback. Pump the brakes, folks. He can't throw the ball. Okay, we saw him. He pretty much ran the ball 90% of his high school career. He threw 2 passes a game. If you watch his high school tape, he basically the balls he threw in spring camp this year were ducks. I mean, yeah, he had one good throw, but that was from 10 yards out into the end zone to a wide open receiver. It wasn't like he threaded the needle 20, 30 yards down the field. But I tell you what, Kadarius Toney, if you stick him in the backfield with Franks or, in a red zone situation and you don't know who's getting the ball, I just think that he is just such a special player to have at your disposal. And I'm going to be so excited to see what the coaching staff has in store for Kadarius Toney. Watching this offense outside of the quarterback position gets me emotional. It's just so exciting to see the playmakers all over the field. There is coaches that dream of having 1 or 2 of these guys, David and Bill. Florida has 5 or 6 guys that could probably start on a lot of other programs in this country. Going down the line from Callaway to Cleveland to Hammond to Powell to Massey to now Toney to Swain. It is crazy to think that all these guys are playing offense for the University of Florida, and all these guys are on the field and going to be on the field this year.
Let me bring it back down a second, Hal. Now, because yes on Callaway, very close to yes, and even some yes on Cleveland, but nobody has seized the tight end spot. Massey has played 1 snap of football at Florida. We don't know how.
4-stars, Bill, and they had a lot of offers, both of them.
Potential. There's potential. I'm saying it's got to translate. It hasn't yet, and so I'm not ready to
I
say.
didn't say they would start on the best programs in the country. I said they would start on a lot of other programs in the country. That means that they would start at other Division I programs, and these guys aren't even starters at the University of Florida. That's what I'm getting at. If you understand what I'm saying, I didn't say they would start at Alabama or Florida State or Georgia. I said they would start at other programs, meaning.
Well, yeah, but that's. I mean, I would make that standard and say how many top 15 programs would they start at?
Okay, Power 5 schools. Those guys would start at other Power 5 schools. You want me to say that? Okay, Power 5 programs.
Yeah, I'm just saying you got let's take it with a grain of salt. There is potential.
Ray Massey was what, the number 2 JUCO recruit last year, Bill?
Yeah, I'm not knocking it. I think, like I said, I'm looking forward to see what he can do. I'm just saying there is a difference in potential and proven success, and we've got to see that.
Swain hasn't proven himself.
Who?
Swain didn't prove himself last year. Swain,
he looked pretty good. He looked pretty good.
Hammond had a couple good games. Obviously, Tyree Cleveland was the number 2 wide receiver in the entire country in the 2016 class.
Luke Del Rio had a couple of good games. I'm saying I want to see it in the big time moments, and it might happen. I'm pulling for it, and I'm acknowledging, yes, it can happen, but let's pump the brakes a little bit. They got to show it.
Yeah, I have to defend.
They haven't had a quarterback to get them the ball. They haven't had a quarterback to get them the ball, Bill. I mean, you're speaking subjectively.
That'll be my one defense, but we still got to see it as well.
I mean, give these guys somebody with an arm, Bill, and any of these guys would be. Would probably have at least 4 or 5 touchdown seasons. I know Callaway and Cleveland would probably be close to 1,000-yard receivers, if not over, with a quarterback that was actually pretty good.
I have to defend.
It's very possible.
I have to defend Kadarius Toney a little bit. He had almost 3,000 yards passing and 32 touchdowns in the air his senior season. So,
and those were all passes over 50 yards.
Well, wasn't he like about a 70% completion guy?
I don't see that. It was 28.94 for yards, 32 touchdowns through the air, ran for 894 yards and 15 touchdowns. So, I mean, geez, totaled 47 touchdowns his senior season as a QB there. So, but DG Productions and I was talking here. We talked a lot on Twitter and on YouTube, and we brought up something interesting here. Mark Johnson, we're talking about him being the third running back. What could be the case in the third running back rotation that Massey or what we were saying, Toney, we kind of compared Chris Rainey a little bit, Massey, Toney taking some of the third team reps at running back?
Ooh. I think, yes, that could happen as a wrinkle.
Yeah, as a wrinkle, yeah.
I don't really want to say that third team running back. I think, Powell's a guy that started off at running back, and so that thought crossed my mind too as an emergency situation. But I think the McElwain is the kind of guy that he's going to want to maintain a running back depth chart, and I don't think he's going to turn Mark Thompson loose, or at least I think he will give either him or the freshman every chance to be that third running back. And I think whatever happens as a wrinkle play is just that. It's a separate thing. But I don't think that you see Toney. I don't think you see – I mean, maybe Powell, but I don't see it as a third running back.
Is there any position that you can look at on offense? We talked about the offensive line depth. I mean, this offense is the deepest we've seen, Bill, in probably 6 or 7 years at this school. I mean, they're 2, 3, 4 deep at almost every position. And we were just talking about how deep the quarterback position is. Is it a good problem to have that Del Rio could start, that Trask could start, that Toney could start, that Franks probably will start? I mean, every position on offense, whether it's running back, tight end, offensive line, wide receiver, all these positions are deep. That's something to be excited about.
Yeah, but at the same time, one of our followers, Aaron Wells, by the way, he asked for a shout out tonight. Hey man, thank you for listening. He just commented a little bit ago. He was kind of upset that we were talking about Del Rio back in the mix here. And yes, I agree with you. There's some depth.
Gotta be real.
And I agree. It could happen, and who knows? It could be good, but let's not get carried away when we talk about depth, because we are throwing him in the mix suddenly there. And as I said, it's just got to translate. And at this point, with where Florida's been the last decade with offense, I would say it is very fair to say, and I think you'll probably agree with this offense carries more promise from a talent standpoint and a depth standpoint than any in several years at Florida. I think initially with Muschamp, there was some hope there with some of the recruiting he had before we found out who those guys were and what he was going to do with them. But this is the year that it could potentially arc upward dramatically. But that's potential. It's just potential right now.
And a lot of that depends also on the offensive line, who, if I guess you could say so-so. I mean, especially the first team, they're going against the second team offensive line. When they got into close to the goal line, you thought they could maybe punch it in on one and run plays, but got completely blown up. And then Scarlett finally scored on their next run. But T.J. McCoy, who I'm a big fan of, and I'm really just going to chalk it up to him just having a bad night. He didn't show that type of inability and that type of somebody getting the best of him at all last season. He didn't show it. What we saw in the spring game, he didn't show that at all last season. So I'm going to chalk it up as just a bad night for him. But in the position that I really expected because of the new coach, and we were all waiting to see it just kind of come out and dominate, we didn't really see it.
Our defense?
No, offensive line.
Oh,
yeah, I was less than thrilled, to be honest. I was a little disappointed.
Don't forget that is a new coach. I mean, you got to give these guys a little bit of a pass just because it's so new, as far as coaching goes. Obviously the defense is not really going to lose that much of a step because Randy Shannon's been there and these guys are used to hearing his voice. But the offensive line, Bill, can't we agree that having a new coach is kind of maybe taking them back maybe at least a little while, and then maybe we can kind of judge them in fall camp and going into the first game of the year?
Yeah, and man, I still think this group has great potential. I think I just set myself up a little bit. I've really been watching tape on them and reading up on them and focusing on the statistics behind these guys. I think I set myself up to forget this is still the second youngest offensive line in the last decade at the University of Florida, and probably well before that. This is one of the youngest groups that I think has played in the modern era in Florida, and I think it showed. But I also think there's still some personnel problems. I think that McCoy probably has a little lower ceiling than maybe we have kind of hyped him up. I think he's going to be a solid lineman. He's still a young lineman. He's going to have a good career at Florida. I think Johnson is playing out of position at guard. I think he needs to be outside. It's just a little too tall and bendy at the waist to play inside. For example, if you guys go watch the game, the first time they got down to the end zone, the play before Scarlett scored, they ran to the right side. Johnson allows walk-on defensive tackle to cross his face to the A gap and destroy the play. That's just not acceptable. And, some of these are mental errors. Some of them are physical. I don't think they have a lot of depth at tackle. I think Johnson might actually end up being a decent backup there as he continues to develop. But and I'm about to get to some good stuff after you respond to this, but there's still some concerns. Plenty of good there, though, that I'll get to in a minute.
Frank's had a pretty clean pocket for quite a bit, though. I mean, if you look at some of his throws, I mean, there was a good, circle around him, Bill. And you even have put some of these little clips up on your Twitter feed.
Yeah, and what I think that speaks to is a couple of things. Number one, I think that the strength of the offensive line right now is on the outside at tackle. I think Taylor and Ivy look like they're going to be very capable tackles at Florida this year, maybe the best they've had in a while. Ivy looks very much as advertised. He's still developing, but I think he's going to have a big year. I think Taylor's going to make another step forward. But they are also up against the defensive line that had Rashard Jones, who just moved his position, looks physically overmatched and still learning. You had Jordan Smith, who's a guy that really has kind of lingered on the roster and not taken a step forward. Those were backups, and yes, they did provide a clean pocket. Again, that's what you want to see. I just don't know how this is going to hold up as we get into the season. However, I think Brett Heggie may have been my player of the game, the guy that surprised me the most. The guy I think is at least the third best lineman on the team right now. So I think you've got very, very serviceable tackles for the first time in a long time at Florida. Well, I don't want to say that. They've had some decent ones, but I think they've got serviceable tackles with a good coaching staff that knows how to use them. I think Heggie is ready to go right now at guard. He's a road grader, a bulldozer. And I think then you got one guy playing out his position and one guy with a little lower ceiling. So I think really if they can get those two positions, the center and the guard, taken care of, whether that be with the guys they've got taking the next step forward or kind of finding the right mix, whether that be Tyler Jordan or Tavares Harkless when he comes back. Yes, again, here we are, a very young unit, but potential to be good. I just think they took some lumps that I didn't expect them to take from walk-ons and backups.
Yeah, what I was wanting to see is Scarlett not being able to have to make his yards. I wanted the offensive line to make his yards for him.
They weren't blowing holes open all the time.
Yeah, I wanted him not to get hit till a linebacker hit him, until he got to the second level. But it was still him or Scarlett, making something happen, making the yards himself. We saw that too many times last year, and that's exactly what we saw Friday night. So, it was just one night, and Joey mentioned it is a new coach. They're still learning. They're still learning his ways. But as far as just coming out and firing off the ball, that's still not the type of performance we saw Friday night.
No, and one guy that we're going to talk about when we get to the defensive line here in a minute, that really actually did pretty well was Kyrie Campbell, but he really kind of made his living on TJ McCoy in a way that was a little bit lopsided, and I didn't like the fact that we had the freshman. Now, hopefully, as we talk about with spring games, whoever looks good is going to make somebody else look bad. Well, hopefully Kyrie Campbell is just that good, but I just saw the starting center kind of being physically dominated at times, and that's a good concern to me.
Going to the defense, that's one thing that I was going to jump into, actually.
No, that's go ahead. That's exactly where we were going next. We don't have a lot to talk about because, as we mentioned, Trask couldn't do anything against the DBs and stuff, so we can definitely concentrate on the line and the linebackers.
Yeah, I don't know if you guys watched that. Well, I know, David, you probably didn't, but Bill, did you watch that special before the spring game where Tom Bougainville met with Marcel Harris and Nick Washington, and they kind of did a breakdown of how they communicate on the back end? I mean, just listening to them two talk football and how they are so knowledgeable, you can tell that those guys have that back end solidified. And not many guys are going to get behind them this year. And it was really nice to see kind of a special, before the spring game started on that. And I just want to say something about the defensive line. I think the defensive line played pretty good. Obviously they were going against the second team offensive line, but I don't think there's going to be much of a drop-off on defense. Obviously, there's going to be some just natural attrition based on losing guys like Quincy Wilson and Tease Tabor and Jared Davis and Alex Anzalone and Caleb Brantley. I mean, just natural. But having CeCe Jefferson back and have a guy like Kerry Clark and Taven Bryan and guys that are veterans, guys that have been around the program for multiple years on the defensive line, I think that alone is just going to help kind of lessen the burden of losing those guys. And I really think that this defense is going to have another good year. I don't think they're going to be great. I think they're too young to be great, but I think well above average is a good place to put this defense. I think Randy Shannon is going to have this defense ready. We talked about in the past about how he wants another head coaching job, and that's motivating him. And I think that's going to help him, want to have a defense that doesn't have a drop-off after Jeff Collins left. Obviously Corey Bell is a stud recruiter, and he's a pretty darn good DB coach. Really good friends with Randy Shannon. Obviously, Randy's not going to bring in somebody he doesn't trust. In the linebackers, how about, Voshawn Joseph? We talked about his one-hit wonder, I guess, on Danny Etling. But he looked pretty darn good to me on Friday night, and he looked like he was ready to take somebody's head off. And that's a good sign. When you're going against your own team and you're ready to kill somebody, I can't imagine what you're going to do to somebody that you don't like. So, it's really good to see that the linebackers, I think this linebacker core is underrated. I think David Reese is going to have a good year. I think Kylan Johnson's going to have a good year. I think Jeremiah Moon's going to have a good year. And I think Voshawn Joseph's going to have a great year. And I'm really looking forward to this defense. I don't think the drop-off is going to be huge. I think this defense is going to be about 80% of what last 2 years have been, which is pretty special. But if the offense improves from 85th to 45th and the defense drops from 2nd or 3rd to 8th or 9th, this team's going to be pretty darn good, David and Bill.
Yeah, as far as the defense is concerned, I saw some really good things. first, let me just start with Kyrie Campbell, just because he was such a surprise, and I kind of started with him earlier. This kid is a prep school candidate. It's a year removed from being a 4-star recruit on Rivals, defensive tackle that really had – I wasn't high on the guy. He didn't have any attention. I mean, he claimed Penn State and a few others that were recruiting him, but I think the only offer he had was like Virginia.
I think Temple was on the list too. And
yeah, it was
at a high school, he had some good offers, right?
Yeah, and what it was, I think it was something to do with the fact that this was a pretty obscure prep school the kid went to that really, I don't think was accustomed to hosting athletes like him, didn't know how to get him out there, and he didn't go to camps and really fell through the cracks. And this might be one that, people like to talk about 3-star gyms. Maybe he is. I think he's at least going to be a solid player. Now, he disappeared at times, but again, he's a freshman. I mean, the guy, he plays a little too vertically sometimes. Thomas Goldcamp mentioned that when he was on the show that he pops up a little bit. Yeah. But there was other times when he fired off low that he would drive right through and disrupt, and he's in the backfield playing around, pressuring the quarterback. Man, we needed that because right now you've got Brian and you've got Clark that look like very capable Florida caliber defensive tackles, and then nobody. I'm sorry, but Rashard Jones was on his back a lot.
But I think Elijah Conliff's going to come in, Bill, and be a star. I do. We talked about that after signing day, and I think he's going to come in and get some playing time this year. I think he's too good of a player, and his body is SEC ready, Bill.
I like the guy. I've made that clear. I'm just saying it's a dangerous game to count on defensive tackles that are freshmen. This is a tough position for freshmen to come in because you're talking about you're right at the point of attack dealing with guys.
Counted on Sharif Floyd and Dominic Easley. We counted on them as freshmen, and they were pretty darn good, Bill. And I think this Elijah Conliff kid is almost on their level. I do.
Well, you're talking about a top 10 recruit in the country, and Easley was up there too. Guys that they were freaks. I don't think I'm ready to put him in that category yet. I think he might have a similar body style to Floyd.
And he plays nasty. We talked about this, David. We talked about Elijah Conliff. He
might be great.
He plays angry.
Yeah, I'm not knocking him at all. I think the guy is going to have a good career at Florida. I'm talking about in the immediate future. And I'm not talking about the long-term prospects. I'm just saying right now you've got a situation where this prep schooler who had an up-and-down game as a freshman, and that's okay. I mean, he's a freshman, but he made some good plays. That was encouraging to me. His stock is up in my camp over here. But other than him, I don't know that you're going to see CeCe Jefferson inside a whole lot. He's lost weight. I mean, now Polite could get some snaps inside, but he really didn't that I saw. But other than that, Luke Ankrum is not going to help them at defensive tackle, at least this year. I think as he spends another year or two in the weight program, gets above 275, then I can see it. He's got a little burst there, some athleticism, but not yet. I don't think Desir Jones helps this year. They've got a serious depth problem at defensive tackle. They are going to be dependent on one of those freshmen. So you're probably looking at freshmen as your third and fourth defensive tackles this year. That's scary. If they lose one of these guys to injury down the stretch, you've got a major problem. We still got Nick Chubb on the schedule. You still got Alabama to play in Atlanta if you get there. You got FSU on the backside. Yeah, Darius Guice. I mean, that worries me. And those are the guys that keep the blockers out of the face of guys like Reese and Joseph. But speaking of Joseph, I was the one that said the guy needed to have a big game to instill some confidence. That guy had a big game. He only had a couple of tackles. He had an interception. He blew up in the backfield. I heard him pop people's helmets at least 5 times. He's violent. He's quick. He's going to help him. He's an every down linebacker. Yeah, they hit on that guy. I think he's going to be good. But it's a precarious situation right now up front because those guys are dependent on those tackles.
Yeah, not much happened with the first team defensive backs. Kyle Trask, as we mentioned, couldn't really get the ball off in time, so we didn't get to see much of Duke Dawson, Chauncey Gardner. It's a good thing in a way too. They covered their guys where even when Trask did have time, he rolled out of the pocket, tried to make something happen with his feet. I believe it was C.J. McWilliams who was on Hammond for the long 46-yard pass. Is that the DB that got beat?
It was MacArthur Bennett, I believe.
MacArthur Bennett there. So. Backup DB getting beat by a receiver that we had heard a lot about who was coming along in spring. So, like we said, not much to look at there from what we could see. Anything you guys took away from the DB since there wasn't much to take away?
Duke obviously had a good game, and the fact that they weren't making the headlines, I mean, that's what I said last week. I just don't want to see the wide receivers running wild. That's one thing for Hammond to get a good catch, but I mean, that's what we wanted to see. We don't want to see Kenny Rogers roasters out there. You know what I mean?
But you, Joey, you see anything from him?
You know, a quick question though, real quick. Yeah. Would you say, Bill, that this is probably the best group of running backs that Florida's probably faced in a while this season coming up? I mean, between Darius Geis, Jacquez Patrick, Travion Williams from Texas A&M. Who else? You got who am I missing? Who did you just mention? Oh yeah, Nick Chubb and Sony Michel. Yeah. Who else do we got?
Well, I mean, they didn't face him last year, but who's that? John Kelly from Tennessee, who looked really good in his limited time last year.
Yeah, it's going to be about every week.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, this is a really good running back class for the SEC. This is a really good year for running backs in the SEC. I mean, between
FSU's FSU's really high on Cam Akers. So
we know that Jacquez Patrick's going to be the starter. Obviously, I mean
day one, but the way that everybody's talking about Akers, they love that kid. So we will see.
Yeah, DeAndre Francois is very, very lucky that he has a backfield that he does.
It's helped him so much. How last year having Cook for sure. So, guys, anything quickly? Bill, you had some shout-outs, I think, of what people who people were impressed with from the spring game, right?
Yeah, but you're going to get us in trouble if we don't talk about these defensive ends.
Oh yeah. I mean,
just quickly, I know when
I did bring up Zuniga last week, and I was happy for what I saw. You know, I did want him to show something, as I mentioned, quote last week, more than the UMass and the North Texas of the world. So, you know, he got in the backfield and showed some and you know, helped sandwich Trask on one play, I believe, him and CeCe Jefferson there.
Yeah, and I'm going to let Joey I know Joey's excited about these guys like I am, and I like to be the one that kind of brings it down a notch. Hey, listen, all right, no, studs. Zuniga looks like a stud. CeCe Jefferson looks like a stud, and now you got some depth building. So I'm giving props here. The one guy I want to bring.
You ever need someone to piss in your Cheerios? Bill Sykes is your guy.
I want to give him both sides. That's all. But Clayton, man, that guy's got moves. He's got the hands. He's got the burst off the edge. But when tight ends got their paws on him, they were able to move him in the running game. That guy is probably a year away. So I know I was kind of one of the ones that got people excited showing some film on that guy. Some of these kids that are coming up, these young defensive ends, get excited about them. Just don't set the bar too high for them yet. The whole group needs to gain about 10 pounds, I think, especially Clayton, so he can hold at the point of attack with the run fits and setting the edge. But they do have a group that's developing here. I like the well-rounded skill sets. I think they can go big with Polite and Jefferson outside. I think Zuniga's getting a little bigger. That guy looks like a Florida defensive end now. I guess I'm not doing a good job at being negative here. The defensive ends look good.
I was wondering.
I wanted to just say this is still a young group. It's still a light group in some regard. And I think Davis is probably going to give you – Kevonnis Davis is going to give you what you see. I know a lot of people are expecting him to be an all-SEC guy. I don't see it. Maybe I'm wrong. But we saw good signs. That's the anchor to your defense, in my opinion.
Yeah, I definitely, you know, my takeaway is what I said in the beginning. It's everything I expected it to be. Nothing less, nothing more. So, you know, but I do want to make an announcement. As Bill and David know, my wife and I are expecting our second child. So we just found out recently. So we're really happy and really excited. And we obviously don't know what it is yet, but we're hoping for a girl because we already have a boy. So, but if it's another boy, we'll be very, very happy. But we got another future University of Florida graduate in the household coming up. So we're really excited about that. And my next 7 months is going to be pretty crazy and planned. So.
And then not much sleep after that. Yeah. Congratulations, man.
So, you know, I know what to expect. So, you know, at least, you know, it's a lot different than number one where you're kind of in the dark. But number two, you kind of know, you know what's going to happen. You know, kind of how to take things and what to expect, so you're not disappointed and let down.
That's awesome.
For sure. Congrats there.
Thanks.
So this was episode 57, where we look back at the Orange and Blue debut. And Bill, I believe you had a few people who got some interaction on Twitter there you wanted to give a shout out to.
Yeah, I did, man. The Twitter interaction we've had lately, and you guys, we just appreciate you so much. And it's just so fun to dialogue with you and to find out where you guys are at and see where we agree and don't agree. But I put out the question before the show, which non-quarterback Gator football player impressed you during the spring game and why? And, you had a solid little group here that responded. Randy Stern loved Heggie. Said that the D seemed to avoid him on passing downs when he was a center, and that's something we didn't mention. But they're still playing with the pieces there. That was an astute observation. He may get a shot. You had World Breaker Rob liked Mark Thompson. He's kind of looking past the fumbles and saw the yardage that he put up, and I thought that was fair. Sim Governor said Garcia. We haven't talked about that, but he's been very good for a walk-on. And then, Patrick Smith said Scarlett. A lot of people said Scarlett and Heggie. Robert Cousins said Campbell. So they were seeing some of the things that we saw. Guys, thank you so much for that. Those are all great opinions, and I can't wait to hash that out and argue about it as we get forward towards the season.
That's right. So, as I mentioned, we just looked at the spring preview. Later this week, it should be tomorrow night, but just there could be some circumstances where it may not happen. But we will get Chris Doering on this week to give his thought on the Gators when he was up close with them during the spring game and the coaches and the players there. We'll get his opinion on the Gators from what he saw, and we'll definitely talk about that receiver position that he knows so much about. So I'm your host on here on Gators Breakdown, David Waters. You can find me on Twitter at GatorDave_SEC. Joey and Bill co-host there. You can find Joey on Twitter at JoeyV_SEC Sports, and Bill on Twitter at Real B Sykes. Guys, anything else before we sign off here?
Just remember #SoberUp Gator Dave.
And to all our listeners out there, think of a debate question for next week's episode.
Yes, there we go.
Oh, hell.
Yes, and we'll tweet that out too. Whatever you want, Joey and Bill to.
We'll do a poll.
We'll either do a poll.
We'll take our most popular.
Yes, or we'll get your guys' opinions for.
That's a good idea. We need to put that out tonight or tomorrow.
Yeah, to debate on. Maybe we should let Chris Doering see that, and he can just look in amazement.
Just something else I can embarrass Bill on.
Your internet's getting cut again tomorrow. Just be ready.
Good fun here. And I will moderate as best possible. And I wonder if I should pick a side or not. I don't know.
My side, man. What are you talking about? Everybody's on my side.
Okay, there we go. I will moderate you as best possible.
Yeah, you moderate neutrally and then go with the side that you believe in through debate.
Yes. There we go. We debate. I will try and come in with no preconceived notions there.
Or if you do, it's our job to try to change your mind.
But boom. There we go. Yeah. All right, guys. So good out to all. Podcast audio version will be out after this video version. So this has been Gators Breakdown, episode 57, where we looked at the spring game and reviewed it for you guys. So for Joey and Bill, not for Dave. For Joey. For Bill.
He's drunk.
I'm drunk. This is Dave Waters signing off on Gators Breakdown.